Welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
Gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small,
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 200 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Well, honestly and wholeheartedly, I cannot believe I'm here. 200 episodes, over 130,000 downloads, and just over an average of 1,000 listens a week and 5,500 a month. All from my home office on my farm in the middle of the Riverina of New South Wales. To you, my listener, whether this is your first podcast episode you've listened to or your 200th, you are amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Without you, I'm just some crazy chick who talks to herself every week about marketing. To my guests over the last 200 episodes, and at a guess, I would say there's been about 80 of them. 2 billion thanks to you also. Literally couldn't have helped as many small business owners that I have through this podcast without your expertise as well. I am so humbled with this milestone, and I have to say, a little proud of me. Other than being a mum and a wife, I really can't think of anything that I've stuck with this long, to be honest. 200 episodes in probably, I think I worked out 185 weeks in a row. That's my calculations, if they're right. I started this podcast to stand out from the crowd, the crowded marketplace that, basically has a street corner for every mentor and coach there is in Australia. I started this podcast because it was something that coaches and mentors that I admired, they all had a podcast. So it made total sense to me that I should start a podcast. I'd never been on a podcast before, and I literally had no idea how to create one. But YouTube saved my butt and taught me what I needed to know to launch my podcast on January 1, 2019, which of course was when I first released my podcast. I had 27 episodes planned back then, thinking that would probably pull me up. I will have used up everything I knew about marketing and exhausted my entire network of people, and 27 seemed pretty huge. Apparently, I still have things to say and ideas to put out there, advice to give, and amazing humans in my network to share with you, because I am a little bit past 27 episodes. So other than the history and saying an enormous thank you, I thought that I would share with you some of my thoughts around creating 200 episodes, some of my lessons of business, being in business, doing 200 episodes. And of course, I asked you what your questions were, so I will answer your questions as well. In fact, that's where I'll start. Here's some questions that my community, and might even be your question, asked over the last few weeks that I've been putting it out there to hey, what am I going to talk about on my 200th episode? So the first question was, what's your weekly podcast process? So I would love to tell you that I am super organized, but that would so not be true. Normally on a Monday morning, because that's when it's diarized, but quite often it's Wednesday afternoon and the podcast is due Thursday morning, I will sit down to do my podcast. If it's an interview, then I'll listen to that interview because it's quite possible that the interview was done a little while ago. So I have an amazing bank of interviews. I just do them when that suits the person, but they often aren't sort of released for a few months after that. I'll write an intro and an outro, and then, of course, I will record that. If it's a solo episode, I write the show notes and do any research I need to do, and then I record and I upload. I do show notes because, I want to be kept on track because I can talk underwater. That may surprise you, but I really can talk, and sometimes I feel like I would get off track if I didn't have show notes. And plus, then my amazing virtual assistant, Lee, shout out to you, Lee, then turns a lot of them into blogs. So takes the show notes from a podcast and turns them into blogs, repurposable content. If you know anything about me, you know that I am the repurpose queen. In the beginning, it took hours and hours. Like literally, I can remember podcast episodes taking me 4 and 5 episodes to produce. Now it's usually 1 or 2 hours that tends to pull me up of, from creation to putting it out there into the world. I still do all my podcasts myself. I do all the editing and everything like that. I often think that I would like someone else to edit my podcast, but really at this point in my business, I'm enjoying doing both. So that's why I do both. But on top of all that, of course, is then writing the email out to my list and creating a social tile and writing captions for my socials. And then again, my beautiful virtual assistants take over and repurpose that content. And not only do they repurpose it, but they republish it. So it goes out on, as a blog, it goes out as a YouTube, which is something I'm working on at the moment with my other beautiful virtual assistant. And I also have it episode might be released this week, but it'll be redone on my socials every 3, 6 or 9 months or thereabouts. So that's pretty much my process. If you are thinking about doing your own podcast, then I'm more than happy to jump on a call and walk you through that in a little bit more detail. But thanks for asking that question. Sam asked, what's your favourite episode so far? I think she knew the answer to this, and that's why she asked, because that's a little bit mean. So I don't actually have one, even though that is a fabulous question, Sam. But I have to say that I will never listen to episode 1 again. It's not that the information is not good. It's that I don't want to hear me. My memory of episode 1 is so traumatizing. Talking to a microphone and not knowing what I was doing, and from memory I edited out all my breaths and all my ums and my ahs and my likes, and I feel like it wouldn't sound like me. So I don't want to go back there. I thought this is what I needed to do. I needed to sound super professional and super great on a podcast, when really the reality is I just needed to be me. And if you hear me talk, or if you meet me in the street or in the supermarket, I'll sound like this. So that's what I do. If I absolutely had to choose a favourite, though, it would probably be this one, purely because I can't believe I am a person who has 200 podcast episodes out there. It's just mind-boggling to me. Episode 100 had the exact same effect on me. I couldn't believe that I was a business owner or a podcaster who had 100 episodes. Now, I've doubled that. So the next question came from Amanda, and it was, how many more will you do? I have no idea. I'm still loving it. So I have plans to keep going at the moment. I have no plans to change my business model or my revenue streams or anything like that. When I don't enjoy doing this anymore, or it doesn't serve a purpose for me or serve a purpose for you as my listener, that's when I'll change. So I don't know how many more I'll do, but at this stage, I don't have a number in mind. I'm still loving what I do. Okay, the next question, not sure who this one came from, is how do you know so much about marketing? Oh, I suspect that that's someone that I know as well. These are tricky little people who put these questions in. They probably know the answers already, but it's so funny. That question is really quite funny, because I remember thinking the exact same thing about my marketing mentor I had for years when I had my retail business. But now I get it. I understand it. this is what I do. This is all I do. Every day I'm reading and listening and thinking about marketing. It's just what I love to do. It's my passion. Just like your passion is your passion. I'm sure that if we were talking and you were talking all about your passion, I'd be like, oh my God, how does he, she, they know so much about X, whatever that is? Marketing is my life. It surrounds my life. When I'm watching TV or I'm out for dinner or I'm daydreaming on my front veranda, I'm probably thinking about marketing on some sort of level or looking at the world through a marketing lens. So it's not that I know so much. It's just that's what I do. I love that saying by Albert Einstein. It's not, what was the saying? It's not that I'm smarter than anybody else. It's that I stick with things longer, or something around those lines. So I guess if I'm thinking about it and doing it all the time, something has to stick. Next question is, what's your biggest piece of advice you could give someone who is new to business? This came from Stacey. Stace, my biggest piece of advice would be just to start. I know it seems so simple and a little bit flippant, but look, I come across people in my business life, in my personal life, in my family life, and they have amazing ideas, but they just fail to start. And then they go through life wondering what could have been. So start is my biggest piece of advice. Follow the people who are like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. When you start, you probably can't afford to engage a mentor or a coach. So you just need to spend time learning from others, like listening to this podcast. And, that costs you nothing to listen to somebody else's podcast or read their blogs or follow them on social media. And that's what you need to do when you're just starting out. Just start and align yourself with people who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, but also align with your business values as well. All right, Jamie had, what's been your biggest challenge? Oh gosh, my biggest challenge. 200 episodes in, one of my biggest challenges is making an episode all about me. I'm a little bit uncomfortable answering all these questions. But anyway, my biggest challenge business-wise, I would have to say, is that dirty, rotten scoundrel who appears every now and then, and she is called Imposter Syndrome. Those stats that I reeled off at the beginning, 130,000 downloads, 200 episodes, etc., etc. If I let my imposter syndrome out, she would rip me apart with those stats, like starting with, who the hell do you think you are? So I push her down and I learn to tame her, and I just don't let her out. That would be one of my biggest challenges in business. Always has been, suspect it always will be. It's just a matter of dealing with it when it comes to fruition. My second biggest challenge, my biggest personal challenge of late, especially this year, I've been really struggling in the background this year around my other role in my life, other than being a marketer, is being a mum. So as you may or may not know, my youngest girl finished school last year and has now gone to uni, and I still have my amazing boys at home that are older, but just having someone fly the coop, my son sort of went to uni, but then he came home during COVID, but to not have my daughter at home with me, being away and all that goes with that, not being a school mum anymore, something I've been for 18, 20 years. There's so many other emotions that come with that, and it's really challenging me at the moment. I think there's a lot of things that probably underpin that, but yeah, that's one of my biggest personal challenges at the moment, is finding myself, I guess, finding where I fit in life, because I don't have young children relying on me anymore. I have older children relying on me. They still want meals and money and things like that. This is different. And I know that if you are that person, that you know exactly what I'm talking about as well. So that's probably why, whether or not you notice it, my business hasn't quite been as full on in 2022 as what it's been in past years, because, I really am, just struggling a little bit with a few little things like that stem stem from that. So I guess the lesson here is that you never know what's going on in someone's life, and you should never judge anybody good or bad, because you just never know. All right. I think there's 2 more questions left. Do you ever run out of ideas for your podcast? That come from Greg. Greg, yes and no is the answer to that. I do have a whiteboard in my office that I put ideas on whenever I think about them or whether they come to mind. And I also have, a running note in my phone when I just think of random ideas as well. I'm inspired by small things, by conversations when I'm out networking or listening to other people's podcasts, or read something on social media or inside a Facebook group. And it doesn't even need to sometimes be a whole comment. It can just be a series of words or a series of words that I see a lot. And all of a sudden it just kind of gives me an idea of something that I could do. But I will say that I'm always open to ideas. So if you're listening to this podcast and you would like me to do a podcast on a particular subject, feel free to definitely send me a DM or an email with your idea. I would love that. All right, Michelle, the final question. What's next for Jen and Small Business Made Simple? What's next for Jen and Small Business Made Simple? More of the same. Can I get to 300 episodes? Who will know? That will be in 2 years' time. So that's a long time away, isn't it? Look, I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. I love my community. I'm extremely privileged to be able to do what I do day in, day out, and make a difference in the lives of the small business owners that I do, whether that's through, my free avenues such as social media and this amazing podcast that I'm super proud of, or whether that is, my paying clients and workshops and webinars and group coaching activities and that sort of thing. So what's new? What's next for Jen and Small Business Made Simple? More of the amazing same. So just quickly before I go, I want to leave you with some of the lessons that I've learned from doing 200 episodes of a podcast. All right. Number 1, if you're scared, start. Just do it anyway. I wouldn't have started this podcast if I had let fear stop me. Number 2, if you think you can't do it, you can. You just need to either believe in yourself or get someone pushy like me who will challenge you, nudge you, push you, and celebrate with you. Number 3, if you think you're not expert enough, in air quotes, you are. Never underestimate what you know that other people would like to know. Number 4, my network has grown because I made space for them. What space do you need to make in your business and your life for your network to grow? Remembering, of course, that your network is very relative to your net worth. Number 5, showing up consistently is key in business. Number 6, listening is much more important than speaking. And I do see the irony of that, considering I have 180 hours of speaking in my podcast alone. But listening is more important than speaking. Number 7, ready, fire, aim have served me well. Number 8, having a community is also key to business. Number 9, making marketing a priority drives you and your business to be bigger, better, and have brighter things come to you, and of course, get more sales. Number 10, feedback is only feedback. Do with it whatever you want. Number 11, you're not for everybody and you're not supposed to be for everybody. That's a hard lesson that little Jen Donovan has taken a lot of years to actually learn and implement in her life. Number 12, your biggest supporters are going to be strangers who will then become besties, regardless of whether you actually ever meet them in person or not. Number 13, my business has opened up so many opportunities for me, I've lost count. And my podcast has opened up so many opportunities for me, I've definitely lost count. Number 14, learning is a lifelong process. Number 15, a rising tide lifts all boats. Be the tide, don't always be the boat. Number 16, business is freaking amazing, but family always comes first. I think that's enough lessons for one day, isn't it? To finish off my 200th episode, I'd like to raise a glass, probably of Pepsi Max, if you know me so very well, or red wine, and thank you. Thank you for being a listener, and keep being amazing at whatever it is that you do. If I could ask a small favor, actually 2 favors, why not? It's my 200th episode. I would love you to share this podcast episode or just this podcast with another small business owner who might need the help and assistance and a little bit of guidance that this podcast can bring them. And if you have time and space, I would sincerely love you to leave a rating and a review wherever you listen to this podcast, if in fact that is possible. But that's it for another episode of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. See you next week for episode 201. In the meantime, let's hang out on social and get social on social. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. And yes, I am getting a little bit teary because I've done 200 episodes. So whatever you do, my small business peeps, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.